The Paracave Podcast, proudly brought to you by major sponsor Jack's Pale Ale, exclusively available at Parramatta Leisure Club, Shannon Cooney from Glenmore Park Realty, BTZD Clothing, and the official media partner of the Paracave Podcast, the Parramatta Times.
G'day, it's Gus Walland here from Gotcha for Life and Triple M. I'd love to invite you along to the Mental Fitness Gym. Go to the mentalfitnessgym.org. That is a place where you can pick up some exercises to build your mental fitness, to work on that emotional muscle, those muscles in your head that are so powerful. Please come and join us at the mentalfitnessgym.org for all that stuff to build your emotional muscle and your mental fitness.
Welcome to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. And now over to your host, Troy Warner, broadcasting live from the world-famous Paracave.
And yes, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. Troy Warner here, and it is week 2 finals review in the NRL, and we saw 2 elimination finals played over the weekend, both at Allianz Stadium. The first one was the Sharks taking on the Cowboys. Now, this was an interesting clash, as going into the week, a lot of pressure, I guess you could say, was on Nico Hines and the Sharks, who hadn't won a semi-final. They lost their last 7 finals games, I should say, dating back to their last win was 2018. So I guess you could say a lot of pressure on them as they finished in the top 4. The Cowboys finished 5th. And a lot of people did say that the Cowboys had the momentum and were probably going to win this game. They had their doubts about the Sharks, especially with that finals record. But the Sharks, boy, did they turn it on and get the victory, 26 points to 18 in front of a good crowd at Allianz Stadium. Look, it wasn't fantastic for the NRL because the AFL prelim final was happening next door at the SCG. So they had a full house, I think 50,000 there at the SCG, and I think there was about 24,000 at Allianz Stadium. A lot of people were suggesting that potentially this game should have been played at CommBank Stadium at Parramatta with a capacity of 30,000. Yeah, look, maybe it could have been, but look, it was an opportunity for them to play that there but maybe get a bit more than 24,000 potentially. But and it would have always been tough going up against the AFL, especially a prelim final with the Sydney Swans being played there next door. But the game was played at Allianz, and look, it still seemed to be an okay atmosphere at the ground coming through the TV screen anyway, but I think maybe there could have been a lot more people at CommBank Stadium if they did play it there, but it wasn't to be. Anyway, the Sharks, boy, did they turn it on. Braden Trindle, how good did he play on Friday night? He had an absolute blinder, probably his best game he has ever played for the Sharks. And look, he had to come through some adversity earlier on in this season due to an off-field incident that he had, but he really came through that during the season, and he turned it on Friday night against the Cowboys. He scored that penalty try. Now, a lot of conjecture about that penalty try. Reuben Cotter took out Braden Trindle. There was thoughts that maybe Tom Dearden may have got the ball, so there's about, I don't know, probably a 60-40 call that yes, it should have been, or yes, Braden Trindle would have got there first. Yes, Tom Dearden would have got there first. Look, I really don't know what I would have said. I think, yes, in the motion of him being tackled by Reuben Cotter, I think, look, you have to be 100% certain that it was going to be a try. I think it probably should have been a penalty and a sin bin, because there was no, I guess you could say, 100% doubt or 100% in the referee's mind that Braden Trindle was going to get there first. Tom Dearden, he's probably the fastest over a short distance for the Cowboys, if not one of the fastest players at the Cowboys, and who knows if he could have got there in time. He did end up with the ball after Braden Trindle was taken out, and he did get tackled just outside the field of play. But look, I think it probably should have been a penalty to the Sharks and then a sin binning for Reuben Cotter. But thankfully, the Cowboys, they didn't get the sin binning, because that would have been pretty hard for them in a semi-final, only having 12 players on the field to defend. They were probably happy with the penalty try, because then they could keep 13 players on the field. And look, you could see Reuben Cotter, when he made that tackle, that it looked like it was a little bit of a mistake. He knew that at the time, but I guess at the speed that everything was happening, it just happened. And look, Braden, he scored another try in the corner, a great diving sort of try that we see these days in the corner. So 2 tries to Braden Trindle, who was the man of the match. A lot of people are saying that he would have got a 10 out of 10 in the old Rugby League week scoring system that they used to have in the magazine. And look, he really took control of the game. He did kick well, he ran well. And look, for me, Nicho Hynes, he probably... Look, a lot of pressure was on him going into this game. He sort of took a little bit of a back seat, I thought. He did his job, don't get me wrong. He did his job. He made his kicks. He got 4 out of 4 conversions, and some of them were pretty hard ones at that, especially the try after Braden Trindle scored in the corner. So that kick was from the sideline. He actually kicked 1 penalty goal as well. So look, his goal kicking was 100%. He did a few kicks in general play. He ran a few times, but it looked like he was happy for Braden to, I guess you could say, take control of the game, and really be that star performer. I very rarely heard Nicho Hynes' name through the commentary, to be honest. It was more Braden Trindle. But look, that would still give Nicho a confidence boost with the Sharks winning that game, going into a hard game this week against the Melbourne Storm down there in... the Penrith Panthers at Accor Stadium, the defending premiers, who they play this week, Saturday night. So, look, that will give Nicho a bit of confidence. You could see the relief on his face at full time. He was excited, and you could see the excitement on all the Sharks' faces that they won a final after that poor finals record dating back to 2018. Toby Rudolph, he was also a massive part of the Sharks' win, especially after that game against Melbourne. He himself would say that it wasn't the best of performances he had in Melbourne last week, but this week he ran hard, made the tackles, and definitely no kicks from Toby this week, but he certainly had a massive game as well. So he was right up there with the player of the match, but Braden Trindle, he was sensational. For the Cowboys, well, look, they were down 24-0 at half-time. They got within 8 points of the Sharks at full-time. They did all their scoring, obviously, in the second half. Valentine Holmes, he scored a double, and quite remarkably, there was reports coming out of that game that he played 7 minutes of that game with a broken leg. So that is amazing. You could see I think it was after he scored his second try, he got up a bit gingerly. Scott Drinkwater took the kick at goal for that one. And then shortly after, I think the Cowboys kicked downfield, and Val Holmes, he was running down the field and just, it looked like a sniper had got him. But look, to play 7 minutes with a broken leg, absolutely amazing. I think at the time, commentators were thinking it may have been worse than that. They were saying it could have been an Achilles, but I think it's coming out as a broken leg. So absolutely amazing to play 7 minutes with a broken leg. He's off to the Dragons next season, so a bit of a sigh of relief for the Dragons, I guess, that it isn't a Achilles tendon, and he will obviously be out of the Pacific Championships coming up in October. Reuben Cotter, look, he was massive for the Cowboys. He scored a try. He obviously made that mistake in that first half with the Sharks' first try with Braden Trindle, as I spoke about before. But he was massive. He had a big game, a great captain's knock, I guess you could say, for the Cowboys. He was probably, I guess you could say, their player of the game. I would give it to their player of the game as well. Played 64 minutes. He had 12 runs, I should say, for 100 metres. And he also made 42 tackles in the game. So, look, a massive effort from Reuben Cotter, and thankfully the Cowboys have got him for another few years now, and it's no doubt that's why he is one of the co-captains of this club. Also, Tom Dearden as well, he tried his hardest as well all throughout the night to get the Cowboys a victory, but it wasn't to be. He was also probably their second best player throughout the night. But for the Cowboys, well, look, their season, they were sort of up and down all season, and their defence was probably their issue throughout the season. They leaked in a lot of points, and unfortunately the Sharks got the jump on them. The Cowboys obviously won the second half, but it wasn't to be. A crucial moment in the game was when Scott Drinkwater got ankle tapped by Will Kennedy, which potentially dead set stopped the try for the Cowboys. So that was a big play in the game, that is for sure. But Kyle Felt, he went off late in the game with looked like a calf injury. He has played his last game for the Cowboys. He is going over to the English Super League next year. So we wish him all the best over there. He's been a great servant for the Cowboys. Obviously, that grand final try in 2015 would probably be his biggest highlight, I guess you could say, but he has scored some fantastic tries for the Cowboys over the years, especially in the corners, diving for the try, that especially with that new, well, it's a few years old now, rule of the corner post not being in action. So look, that was so we wish him all the best over there in the English Super League. As I mentioned before, Valentine Holmes, he's off to the Dragons next year to reunite with coach Shane Flanagan, who coached him at the Sharks. So that is a loss for the Cowboys in the centres there. I'm sure they'll find someone to replace him. Obviously, they have to. But a good pickup for the Dragons there. The Sharks, they move on next week to face the Penrith Panthers, the defending premiers, at Accor Stadium on Saturday night for the chance to make the grand final. Now, a preview will come up later in the week from myself about these two prelim finals, so stay tuned for that one. The second game, also played at Allianz Stadium on Saturday night, was between the Roosters and the Sea Eagles, and the Roosters lost last week to the Panthers. They had to fight back to beat the Sea Eagles this week to stay alive in the competition. The Sea Eagles, they had a last-minute sort of victory against the Bulldogs. So did that take that out of them? It was a pretty physical game last week against the Bulldogs. This crowd on this night was a sellout, but it got posted at 40,818. So no AFL on at the SCG on Saturday night, but a fantastic crowd there at Allianz Stadium, and it was a great crowd coming through the TV screens as well. And no doubt if you were there, you would have enjoyed that atmosphere, that is for sure. Now, two big ins for the Roosters before this game. Jared Waerea-Hargreaves and also Victor Radley as well took his spot in the team. Victor actually got the first try of the game as well after the 11th minute, so that was good to see. But all the big action happened right at the start, and unfortunately for Manly, Tolu Kula, he tried to put the big shot on big JWH and unfortunately came off second best and was ruled out for the rest of the game. Jake Trbojevic on the second play of the game, the second tackle of the game, he went off for a HIA as well. He was ruled to come back onto the field. There was a little bit of controversy about that one. It did look like he was in a bad way at first, and it did look like he was trying to get back up, but then Connor Watson has pushed him back down again. So that probably, I guess you could say, sort of saved him from being ruled out for the game, because there was no definite conclusion of him being ruled out, as he did try to get back up after that tackle. So, but still, that doesn't help Manly's cause straight up at the start of the game, as it doesn't help anyone's team if that sort of situation happens. James Tedesco, the Roosters captain, he was massive for them. He was probably their player of the match. He absolutely carved it up. He ran. He's actually, his first try that he scored was a pretty slick backline movement that just sort of went out the backs. He was sort of floating around Luke Keary, and then he got the ball, and then I think it went to Daniel Tupou, who ran down the sideline and then passed it back inside to James Tedesco, and that was his first try. His second try was a great run up the middle. Absolutely sort of dodging, weaving, beating players. It was a great try, that one. A real fullback sort of try, I guess you could say. 25 runs, 226 metres, 2 tries, 3 line break assists, 2 try assists. So he was anywhere and everywhere. And look, he has had a really good season this year. He only played the one Origin game, so that's probably helped him a little bit, I guess, in terms of fatigue in the season. But there is talk around that he will get a contract extension with the Roosters, one for potentially 1 year, maybe 2, but they may go 1 year at a time from now. He is contracted for 2025, so this is for 2026. He is coming up. He played his 250th game on Saturday, and he is looking like, if over the next 2 years, if he stays fit and healthy, he will play 300 games in the NRL, which is a very good effort indeed. And look, I think, my personal opinion, I think he will get the Kangaroos fullback in the Pacific Championships. He is the current captain of the Kangaroos. In saying that, he was the captain of the New South Wales Blues, but that honour went to Jake Trbojevic this year. So, look, anything could happen, but all I've been hearing is that Mal Meninga is a pretty loyal coach. So I think James Tedesco will get picked for Australia. Look, potentially, maybe down the track, he could probably... James Tedesco could get picked and still be captain, and maybe Dylan Edwards on the wing, potentially. That worked last year. Well, it didn't work last year because Australia got flogged by New Zealand 30 points to nil in the final of the Pacific Championships, but it seemed to be working last year. But what do you do? Do you pick James Tedesco and leave Dylan Edwards out? Or vice versa, who knows? That's a podcast for another day. But in this game, certainly James Tedesco, he was one of the Roosters stars, probably if not the star. Sandon Smith as well, he was under a bit of pressure going into this game as well. Probably didn't have the best of games at number 7 for the Roosters last week against the Panthers, although he did score a try in this game. It was a great sort of individual effort. He backed himself, he used his footwork and scored a great try, and potentially that took a little bit of pressure off him and gave him a little bit of confidence in scoring that try as well, knowing that he can do it in such a big game. And it was a big game for the Roosters, that is for sure. Look, for the Sea Eagles, well, look, as I mentioned, it was always going to be tough for them, especially after those first 2 tackles, losing those 2 players for HIAs. Tom Trbojevic, he got the most run meters for them, 207, and 1 line break as well. But we all know he was playing injured as well. Always tough to play with an injury in such a big game, such as this one. Look, they'll be disappointed. They'll be disappointed about this. They were were mentioned as one of the smokies of this competition early on this year. They made it to week 2 of the finals. So they had that good win against the Bulldogs in week 1, but it was going to be tough to beat the Roosters, especially at Allianz Stadium in front of 40,000 people. But look, they'll be back bigger than ever next year, and they will give this competition a fair shake next year. As for the Roosters, will they move on to playing the Melbourne Storm down in Melbourne on Friday night? Now, they've only won, it's well publicised that their records against Melbourne and Penrith aren't the best. They've only won 1 in 11 clashes against Melbourne. So, look, it's going to be tough to go down there and beat Melbourne in front of a full house. Now, apparently it's a public holiday in Melbourne on the Friday due to the AFL Grand Final on the Saturday. So it's a public holiday in Melbourne. So they are expecting a full house as well. There's no AFL on Friday night. So they are expecting a full house down there at Amy Park. I'm not 100% sure how much Amy Park holds, but I'm assuming about 30,000 there at Amy Park. So they are expecting a full house there, full of purple. And there will be a handful of Roosters fans going down there for the game as well, if they can get a flight on these airlines. They are charging ridiculous prices too, by the way, just quietly, but I don't know whether it is about big games, big events, and the airlines charging more to get to games, but it's the same for the AFL fans from Brisbane trying to get down to Melbourne as well. Things like $1,500 to $2,000 flights because of the grand final. It's massive money for one game. So hopefully the Roosters can get a bit of support down there. Look, if you can't get a flight down there or you don't want to pay those prices, just drive down there. And look, if you have to, sleep in your car, because the Roosters, they are going to need as much support as possible down there in Melbourne to get this victory. Look, I wouldn't The Melbourne will go more about this in the preview coming up, as I mentioned before. But just quickly, I think it's going to be tough for the Roosters to get the victory down in Melbourne. Melbourne will go into the game as favourites, but I wouldn't rule them out. So that is the review for the two games that were played in week 2 of the finals, the Sharks and the Cowboys, and the Roosters and Sea Eagles. We are now down to 4 clubs who have the chance to win this competition, with the prelim finals being played this weekend. And those games will be the Roosters versus Storm on Friday night down at Amy Park, 7:50pm, and the Panthers taking on the Sharks, 7:50pm on Saturday night as well. But as I mentioned before, there'll be a preview of those 2 games coming up later on in the week. So thank you very much for listening to this review of the finals week 2, the NRL finals week 2. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it. If there's anything you would like to add, just let me know via the social media channels. Please give me a follow on Facebook and Instagram. That would be most appreciated as well. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share with your family and friends. And look, if your team is still alive in this NRL competition, good luck. But as I always say at the end of podcasts, go Para!
Hello, Paracave podcast listeners. My name is Shannon Cooney from Glenmore Park Realty and long-term sponsor of the Paracave podcast. If you're looking to sell your property or buy, or just curious to know what your property is worth in today's market, give me a call today on 0421 588 445.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Paracave Podcast.